50. Are we? Hi, everyone. I hope you're all well. My name is Anthony Sinclair. It's lovely to meet you all. Welcome to the virtual village hall. And I'm going to give you some sign language tuition this afternoon and a little bit of information about how to work with an interpreter within the deaf community. So I hope you're all well and you all had a great weekend. I also had a really nice weekend, but I'm from Belfast in Northern Ireland, and at the weekend, myself and my wife we wanted to do something different, so we decided to take the children to London. So we went to London for the weekend, and it was the first time that we've been out of Ireland for such a long time. And we were a bit nervous, to be perfectly honest, because of the coronavirus and flights and bumping into people and milling around everybody and it being so busy. But the flight was so smooth. Everything went well. We have three children, and we treated them to a performance at the Lion King in the West End. And when we arrived really early in the morning on the Friday. We had opportunity to look around London. We saw Big Ben, and the children were just in awe of all these massive, great big things. We went to a green park, and the weather was lovely. We were very fortunate. We also went to St James's Park, and we saw the animals there. There were some birds and parrots and squirrels, and the children just absolutely loved it. In the evening, we then all went to see the Lion King, as I said, and we all sat down, kind of sitting in anticipation. I mean, it's been so many years since I was in the theatre, and it was just that on that occasion in the past, it was just my wife and myself. Whereas now we had the three children, and I really did expect the youngest child, our daughter Kate. She is 2. She's coming 3. She's nearly 3. I really expected her to be wanting the loo and kicking the seats and not paying attention. And she was absolutely mesmerized all the way through. It was amazing. She sat still and watched the whole of the performance. So I enjoyed it because they enjoyed it. And then they kept going on and on and on about the Lion King and the giraffe and the lion and the birds. And oh, they absolutely loved it. And it was really nice. We all got T-shirts with the Lion King on, and my son was then showing everybody, look where we've been, look where we've been. We're showing off our T-shirts, and but it was great. We had a fantastic weekend, and London felt very different to me because I think we've all been in lockdown in the same places for such a long time, saying in our kind of local vicinity. We've been to the country and we've been to the beach and things like that, but we've not been to a big city for nearly 2 years. So it was lovely. So that was my weekend. I hope you all had a good weekend. If anybody has any questions, you might need to type them so that I can see them. I know that you can hear the interpreter, but the interpreter can't hear you. So the plan for today is we're going to have a brief explanation of how the deaf community works with interpreters and alongside interpreters. And I'll explain about a situation that happened 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks ago, some people missed the session because they had arrangements. So I'm happy to go through some of the things that we covered 2 weeks ago. And then I'm going to teach you some basic signs linked to nature. And I have some of them here behind me. Okay, so in regards to the deaf community, how they work with interpreters is not always easy. And the reason for that is Some people work for themselves. They're used to doing their own work. And as a deaf person, they have to then think when they're going to need an interpreter. And sometimes, you're not going to know when you need an interpreter until you need one, and it could be quite short notice. There might be events or meetings or staff briefings. You might need them for medical situations. So you need to go to the doctor and things like that. So you need to arrange an interpreter in advance. And you have to also make sure that the interpreter translates that information properly. Like, for example, if you were ever having to go to court and be a witness, you would have to make sure that the interpreter was very accurate with your statement. And the same with the hospital. You want to make sure that your medical information is correct. So the interpreter would prepare, but you also need to prepare. So you need to work with the interpreter and maybe tell them what they need to know, because it's not just a case of we pluck an interpreter out of nowhere and everything is perfect. They're not the panacea. They are, there are certain things that have to be put in place, and when they are put in place, they can work perfectly. They can be very, very smooth. Sorry. In terms of the interpreters, there are all sorts of different types of interpreters. There are some interpreters who have just recently become qualified. There are some interpreters who've been qualified for an awful long time and have a great deal of experience in particular domains like court and police and medical, and and they are very confident in taking work in lots of different domains. Because I know recently, a recently qualified interpreter was struggling in a particular environment, and they were making a few mistakes, and that just comes with time. Sometimes that experience comes with them once they've been in lots of different environments. But because of the pandemic and the coronavirus, a lot of interpreters have been working online, and they have had to struggle with that technology side of things as well. Like a little bit like today, there was all sorts of different things happening behind the scenes today in terms of technology. And I am not personally, I'm not brilliant at technology. It's not my forte. So I have to kind of force myself. I didn't give the interpreter the right information, or he didn't receive it, and that kind of thing. So lots of things sometimes have to happen in the background. But in terms of how you become an interpreter, you usually go through your sign language qualifications, like BSL level 1, and then upwards to level 6. And then once you do level 1, level 2. So there are levels that are equivalent to GCSEs. And level 3 and level 4, they're equivalent to an A level. And level 6 would be equivalent to a degree. So the interpreter would work their way through those qualifications. So it's not just a case of being able to kind of fast track through in a couple of years. You have to actually learn all the intricacies of sign language as well as spoken language as well. And sometimes people think it's just about signing. It's just about how you sign, and it's not. You have to, in the same way that spoken language interpreters have to know both of their spoken language domains, a sign language interpreter has to know both of their domains quite well as well. So, they have to know the structure of the language, the facial expressions, the features of sign language. Sign language is an absolutely beautiful language, and it's about reflecting that in your interpretation. Sometimes, when people start, their facial expressions might not be quite right because they're learning a second language. And the more that they get used to that, and the more used to using the language they get, you see that they then have all the elements of using sign language. And it is an amazing language. I absolutely love using sign language. Okay, so do remember that if you've got any questions whatsoever about anything that you hear or any experiences with the deaf community, just pop them on the private chat, and then we'll have a look at them and we may explore some of them. You don't have to write reams and reams, but you just have to write something, and then we'll pick it up if we can. So becoming a qualified interpreter, quite often interpreters won't work directly with the actual people themselves like they don't get booked by the hospital, they don't get booked by the court. That, you know, what they tend to do is they work first of all in the community, and they gain that experience, and then they build things up, and then they'll broaden out and work within those what we call specialist domains later on. Interpreters have to work quite hard, because what they're doing is they're processing information in English as well as in sign. And in order to get the quality of interpretation correct, you know, we would say that your mind and your brain become quite tired after about half an hour, because you're processing information differently to that you're listening to, and you're working out how you sign that in sign language or in English, vice versa, and it can be quite exhausting. So about half an hour, you're worn out, and you often make a few mistakes. That's why it's quite important to have what we call a co-worker, so a second interpreter, that they can then take turns and assist one another in terms of the interpretation. One of the biggest problems within the deaf community is, if, you know, I particularly need an interpreter and I'm paying for an interpreter, the interpreters are quite expensive, rightly, because they've trained for many years in order to become qualified, and they're skilled in the same way that a spoken language interpreter is. And you would know that that's not cheap, because you're paying for somebody's, you know, 10 years of, you know, training, or 7 years of experience, or, you know, whatever it is. So different organizations who and businesses who utilize sign language interpreters, they often are a bit dubious about paying for them, because they've never had to do it in the past. So sometimes there is always an issue within the deaf community about who pays for the interpreter, because a deaf person should never really have to pay for an interpreter themselves, because it's their right to information. But it is getting better. With the increased awareness, things are actually improving. And the deaf community do need access to sign language interpreters, because it's their access to communication. It's not just because it's nice to have somebody go along with you. It's so that other, it's, yeah, yeah, sometimes the screen's freezing a little bit on the interpreter, so I'm just making sure that he can follow me and I can see Anthony well. So, within the deaf community, you've got a variety of different demands on interpreting services. Some people work in businesses, some self-employed, some, you know, need to go to the hospital, some have sporting events or coaching. And so there would be a variety of different demands placed upon an interpreter, be it court, police, hospital, dentist, doctors, you know, and the interpreter has lots of different roles, so they have to put themselves in lots of different settings. But their main role is to transfer one language into another, culturally and linguistically. And so, but you also have to learn the different things about those areas. So if you're going into court, you need to know about legal. You know, you don't have to become a lawyer or a solicitor in the same way that if you work in a hospital, you don't have to be a doctor, but you do have to know the medical jargon that's being used. So interpreters have to familiarize yourselves with that. I have a friend in London, and he's chief of finance. He's a CFO, so he's very high up in the organization. So, you know, and he is profoundly deaf and uses sign language as his first language. And he has 2 interpreters every day, Monday to Friday. And he requires 2 interpreters to be with him constantly. And he started that work, you know, he was just, you know, a runner in accounts. He was just literally promoted and promoted and promoted as the years went on. And now he's head of his, you know, finance. So he really does have to be very clear on his information and his direction. He has to motivate staff as well as sometimes dismiss staff and employ them. So, you know, he says he could not use somebody who's just fresh out of university, because he needs interpreters who are very experienced. I've got another friend who lives in Scotland, and she requires a full-time interpreter. And really, she was saying it's thanks to the interpreters that she got through university. She did all of her medical training. She is actually a doctor. She's a doctor, and you know, she's saying I couldn't have done all of these things without the interpreter support. It just would not have worked, you know. And sometimes some things are still quite difficult, like surgery. You know, we know with all the masks that we're wearing now. She said there is a delay, and sometimes, um, you have to work your way around different things. But yeah, it can be extremely successful. And within the deaf community, there are some areas that deaf people can't apply for jobs in, like the emergency services, police, fire fighters, pilots. You can't apply for those jobs if you're deaf because they say that the communication doesn't allow for it. But there are still lots and lots of people in employment now that they wouldn't have been in 20 years ago. And in regards to BSL, the recognition of BSL was in 2003. But prior to that, there was no recognition of sign language in our countries, in the whole of the UK. And after 2003, when it became recognized, the deaf community then started to have access to different domains and areas and places, like the theatre and the cinema and things like that. We're still constantly fighting in Northern Ireland for a BSL and ISL charter. ISL is Irish Sign Language, and and it is used within Northern Ireland because we have two languages. We have two communities in Northern Ireland, and the use of language is very different in either. It's almost like speaking to a foreign national when you're talking to somebody from Ireland who might live like 10 miles down the road and they're using a completely different language. So we are actually working towards that charter here in Northern Ireland. It's not been achieved in some places in the UK. It has been achieved in Scotland, but we want more recognition and we want more access and inclusion to sort of like, the judicial system, for example. We have the right to have interpreters in the judicial system. And within the deaf community, we are very keen to see that improve. Okay. How are we doing? Are we all okay? We're all doing okay. Yeah. What I'll do now is I'm going to teach some of the signs linked to nature. So when I teach the signs that I may also cover some of the signs that we covered in April as well, almost like, as a refresher, and, some of the welcome signs, name, hello, age, that kind of thing. So we may do a refresher on that, and I'm going to teach you those again as a refresher because there may have been some people who missed that. And I also think it's important to refresh on signs because if you then meet somebody, you've got the confidence to greet them and say hello and know that, how are you? And then so this is hello. Hello. How are you? How are you? And the response, you could respond by saying, point to yourself in the first person, I'm, and that's you. So anything to do with yourself, you point inwards. Anything to do with them, they point outwards, and you would direct it to where that person was standing. So if there was a female to your right, you would say she and point to the female in that location. You would move your finger around to point to those people. And it's part of our language. Your mum always told you it was rude to point. It's not in sign language. We call it indexing, and we index to what we're talking about. We point to what we're speaking of. So I'll do that again. Me or I, you, she or he, they. Okay? And that might seem strange that somebody is pointing so directly at you because within your culture, you were told, don't point, it's rude. Deaf people don't have that. It's part of our language. So I'm giving you permission to point. Okay. So, and one of the responses could, to how are you could be, I'm good. Thank you. I'm good, thanks. Yep. Do that again. How are you? I'm good, thanks. Name. This is the sign for name. Name. And if you don't know how to spell out the name, don't be concerned about that for the time being. That you can Google that and you can get an alphabet sheet on the internet very easily. Um, and you're looking for BSL. So if you Google the BSL alphabet, it will come up and you can practice that and learn that. There are lots of examples on the internet. You're looking for the images of the hands in different shapes for A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on. So it's very important to know how to spell your name. Okay, so this is the sign for name from your forehead outwards. Hello, my name, and then it's Anthony. Okay, I will explain that again. In Northern Ireland and in Scotland, England and Wales, we all have regional differences in the way that we sign, in the same way that you have regional differences in the way that you speak. But and that's normal. It's people say, well, why can't there just be one sign for for the whole of the country? And you think, well, why isn't there just one accent for the whole of the country? It's part of your culture and language and how you've grown up and where you've lived and what experiences you've undertaken. And it's kind of like, sometimes we'll come across words from people in Scotland and you think, I don't know what that word is, but you soon work it out because you can put it into a sentence and it's the same in sign language. Okay, so there will be some regional differences. In Northern Ireland, I'll give you some examples of some of the signs. Lovely to meet you. Lovely, lovely to meet you. Lovely from your cheek to meet you. In England and Scotland, it's a similar sign, but it comes from the chin. Lovely, lovely to meet you. So it's very similar, but that's just a regional difference. Lovely, lovely to meet you. Okay, so there's just some examples. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so we're going to learn some nature signs now. Okay, I'm going to teach you this sign first. And there's the spelling of it, Tree. And here's the sign if you use that, tree, tree. Okay, forest, 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 forest. And you can see that there's just multiple trees. And that's what a forest is. It's multiple trees. So tree, yeah, so use your base as the ground and the land. You use one arm to represent the ground and the other for the roots of the tree to base upon, and tree in the wind, tree. And then two arms, forest, going forward to show that there are multiple trees. Okay. Park. There are two different signs for park. And, you know, I have children who love going to the park, and if it's a play park, they would do this sign for park to show the swings park, because it's the focus of the park is the swings and the slides and that kind of thing. And that's a very visual sign. And then the second sign is this one, park, park. So a flat hand shape with 4 fingers splayed, park, park. So I'm right-handed when I sign, so I would use my dominant hand always when I sign. If you're left-handed, then you would do it that way, the opposite way. So you use your dominant hand to sign. Okay? Lake. That's the sign for lake. Lake. And it's just a vast display of water. It's the shape of a lake. 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 Okay? So I'm going to go over those again. Forest. Tree. Park. Lake. Great. Well done. So now I'm going to move on to the next sheet. In Northern Ireland, the sign for beach is this. Beach. Beach. It's the feel of the sand in your hands. Beach. Beach. In England, beach. It's the tide and the shore. Beach. Stephen's useful in this because he's English himself. You'll hear his voice and he'll know both Northern Ireland signs and English signs, and Stephen's agreeing that that's the correct sign, Anthony. Sea. Sea, where the waves are more prominent. Or sea, if you wanted to show the direction of the tide. Sea. Sea. And then you can show that the waves were choppy or whether they were, surfable waves, all that kind of thing you can add to your use of sign. Mountain. 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 A rugged peak. Mountain. So show the ruggedness on the way up. Yeah. River. 2 fingers and then a winding stream. So 2 fingers together, 2 lots of 2, if you will, and then the winding river. So a road you would show in the same way, but it would be straight. Okay, so that's how to differentiate the signs. This is road directly, and then river meandering, a winding river. Okay, so we've got river and mountain there. I'm going to go over those again. So the Northern Ireland sign for beach is this, beach. The English sign and Scottish sign and Welsh, as I believe, is beach. Beach. Sea or sea. You can do it just with one hand if you wanted. Sea. Mountain. Mountain. River. Okay. Two more. Desert. If you're talking about a desert of land, this is the sign for land. Land. So desert is dry land. So it's the sign for dry and then land. So desert. So it's dry land is how it translates. Desert. So it's a compound sign with two elements to it, dry and then land. Camel is the two humps of a camel. 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 And you would mouth it as you were doing the two humps. Waterfall. In Northern Ireland, the sign would be water, water. So four fingers spread out, tapping your chin, water. And in England and Scotland and Wales, the sign is water, water, down on the bone of your cheek, water. Okay, so if we know that that's water, waterfall, fall. So that's the fall element of the sign. So in Northern Ireland, you would put those two together and have waterfall, waterfall. Depends on, the size of a waterfall. This one here, you would probably just use the one hand, waterfall. But if it's an enormous waterfall that you're speaking of, you would use two hands to indicate size. And England and Scotland and Wales is waterfall. Waterfall. So I'm going to repeat all of those. So nature signs, nature. N, so use the N, and then you're spreading it across your palm, nature. So you do the same for nature and then land. Forest. Tree. Park. Lake. Beach. Beach. Sea. Mountain. River. Desert. Camel. Waterfall or waterfall. Brilliant. Excellent. So as I sign, I have been signing for quite a long time, so I want to encourage you to sign now. And I'm going to point to these elements on the board behind me, and I'm going to encourage you to use the signs now. So we want you to practice. What's the sign for mountain? Mountain. Very good. Excellent. What about waterfall? Yep. Waterfall or waterfall. What about tree? Excellent. Tree. Yep. And have the base. Yep. Lake. Yeah. Lake. Yep. Lake. River. Good. River. Nice and meandering. Yes. Good. Forest. Forest. Sea. Yep, good. Sea. Nice and wavy. Beach. Beach is one sign, or beach is the other one. Good. Camel. Yeah, the two humps, camel. And then one more. Desert. Good. Desert. Two parts to that sign. Well done. Well done. Very good. That's brilliant. So, so I want you to sign the sign for how are you? Yep. How are you? What about thank you? Thank you. Well done. Well done, everyone. Really. Oh, what's happened there? Oh, yes. I missed some of the comments there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign, and then you have to type what I'm signing. Okay? So I want you to get active and type what I'm signing. Okay, number 2. Yep, you're right. Number 1 is right, mountain, and number 2 is right, forest. Good. Number 3. Number 4. Yeah, you're right. Number 3 is river, Jennifer and Fiona and Gisela. Good. One more. Number 5. Yep, you're right with number 4. It is C. SEA. Yes. And number 5, you're also right. Desert. Good. Well done. Well done. So now we're going to get ready for finishing. And I hope you've enjoyed that. Just uh, an interesting chat about how the deaf community work with interpreters and how one becomes an interpreter, and then also the signs. If anyone comes across an interpreter kind of actively working, um, they're not going to give you eye contact when they're working because it's very important for them to have eye contact with the deaf community. So you look at the deaf person even though they are looking at the interpreter, and the interpreter will be looking at the deaf person. You'll find a little bit out of the ordinary. It's not that usual. It's not very natural. um, form of communication, but it's effective because it means then that everybody gets to find out what's going on. The interpreters act as a bridge between the hearing community and the deaf community, but they need to have eye contact with the deaf person when they're working, because sometimes the hearing person will stare at the interpreter all the time, hoping that they're going to get eye contact, but the interpreter can't give you eye contact because they need to give that to the deaf person. That's just one other little tip that I'll pass on today. Okay, I just want to say a massive thank you for your time in coming to watch and learn this afternoon. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again. Thank you for volunteering and coming forward and giving me the opportunity to teach you today. Okay, have a lovely, lovely day. I've used two different signs there. Lovely, lovely day. Everyone, thanks ever so much. Bye.